Thank you very much, Val. I want to add my welcome to each of you. I've got about a 25-page report here that I was going to read, but I've decided not to do that, because I know how you folks like to hear those kind of things. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what happened to me before we started DHI. I was born in Springville, Utah, back in the days when there was no electricity in this valley. Can you believe that? I experienced that here not too long ago when we didn't have electricity. And you know, I've told my friends all over the United States as I've traveled what a great place it is to be in Provo, and I know this is true, and they agree with me on that. I told them we never have any tornadoes, we never have any major disasters. We're in a potential earthquake zone, but we've never had one in Provo that I remember. And then here, not very long ago, we had that disaster, you know. And Mayor, it used to be when the power would go off for 5 minutes, I was on the phone calling the power company and saying, how long is it going to be before we're going to have electricity back? Well, I don't know whether you got very many calls or not this time, but it was obvious to all of us that the power was going to be down in Provo for a little while. And you know, one of the great things that happened here at DHI is that standby system that cost us more than $250,000 came into play and just worked like a top. And our customers all over the United States didn't even know we were down until they read about it in the newspaper. And so this was a wonderful experience and showed us what a great thing it is to plan ahead for any type of eventual disaster. Well, the first part of my life I spent in the academic environment. I was a professor at Utah State, at the University of Nebraska, at Iowa State University, and the University of North Carolina. And I left Utah State several different times and was always invited back at a higher salary and a better position. And I was pleased to have had that experience. When I was just little, I always liked to measure things. When I was on the farm over in Springville, my dad was in the sheep business, and when we had run a bunch of sheep across the scales, he wanted to know what the average was very quickly. And I says, Dad, I can, if you'll give me a little bit of money, I can get some paper over at Sears and I can build a table that'll make it possible for you to look at that and tell exactly what it is. Well, back in those days, I was in the midst of the Depression, when pretty hard to come by nickels and dimes, and so he didn't let me do that. But he was a great individual. I want to pay tribute to him. He laid the foundation that made it possible for me to do what I've done. I don't know of anything I'd rather have done than have had the opportunity of working with people like you to provide a service to mankind that's very useful. I'm probably the oldest member still alive in the American Statistical Association. I don't know that for a fact, but I've belonged to the American Stat Association since I first learned there was such an organization. And they're people who really know how to measure things and make sense out of large volumes of data. I knew W. Edwards Deming, who recently passed away, who was really responsible for Japan making the great improvement in their economy that he did. I didn't know him personally, but I knew him by reputation. And he was a great statistician and a great individual. It's our job at DHI. We're different than most high-tech companies, Mayor, in that our customers' data reside right here in Provo for the main part. And so when we're down, they don't have access to their data. And we're not down very often. We have a very high percentage of uptime. We know how to convert data, vast amounts of data, into, number one, information that makes sense. Then we know how to change information into knowledge, knowledge into intelligence, and intelligence into wisdom. And like the thing we hear on TV occasionally, we measure success one customer at a time. And we're concerned, and I attended an AT&T convention not very many years ago, Mildred and I, and they were amazed to find out what kind of relationship we had with our customers. Most of them we know on a personal basis, and we share in their success, and we're sorrowful when they have failures. I've always believed back to my first days that if you want to be successful in any kind of endeavor, you need to know the leaders in that field and where the ideas are being born. Consequently, I've always traveled a great deal, and I've known most of the people involved in the line of business that I've been working with. When I was on the school board at Provo, I insisted that the members of our school, the key people, traveled and participated in distant locations. That was not a very popular thing with the government, with the public. Generally, people look about people traveling to conventions that you get it because they're selling so many refrigerators or something of this kind. But I believe and that it is true that you need to be acquainted with the people where the ideas are being born, and we've tried to do that. Beginning of DHI, let me just tell you an anecdote that really happened. Some of you have heard me say this before, I believe. When we applied for being included in the telephone directory as a computing center, nobody knew where to put us. There weren't any. Nobody had ever had a computing center anywhere. We were the first one established between Chicago and San Francisco, the only one. I had had the opportunity of serving as a consultant to Dugway Proving Grounds, where they were doing a lot of work and where they had a lot of things they were trying to measure and make sense out of it. I served there as a consultant. And I had the idea, hey, this would be really great if I could develop a computing center and service these kind of government installations. Well, I soon found out that it was almost impossible to pay the bills if I waited until I got a government contract. And you know, we had an experience here just a few days ago of working on a proposal to the state government on a new project that we might be interested in doing. We are equipped, we can do it very well. But it's the same thing. There's so much red tape, it's almost impossible to find out what they want done and how to measure whether or not you're successful. And generally on those things, you have specification creep where you start out shooting for one objective and the first thing you know, it's changed to something else. Well, in our management information system, you know, information is a magic word in our society today. Information. We hear about the information highway, the National Information Highway, and it's probably going to come and will be here and available. But you know, DHI started an information network 40 years ago. It was a kind of a rocky road, and we were probably traveling with a Model T because that's all was available at that time. But one thing we've done at DHI through these 40 years is we've been able to bring to our customers almost every advance in data processing that's come down the pipe. Let me just review with you some things that I think are critical. When performance is measured, performance improves. And when performance is measured and reported, performance accelerates. That's one thing that we've been doing at DHI for these 40 years. One's judgment is no better than his information. Other famous people have said that. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I've been quoted as being the author of that. I probably heard it from somebody else. But that, I think, is a truism. I also believe, and we try to understand this, that when you're in a service industry, there's going to be mistakes occasionally that are made. And when those mistakes are made, you end up with a liability. And how you respond, and each of you as employees of DHI, we try to train you this way. How we respond when there is that liability, we can change that into an asset that lets us come out better than if we hadn't had the failure in the first place. I also believe and learned at Iowa State University, where I was a student in agronomy and genetics, that in order for a species to survive in nature, it had to have a balance between stability and lability. And I remember a college professor pacing back and forth, smoking a cigarette and talking about the balance between stability and lability, and he mentioned this, that in his opinion, about 90% needed to be stability. If you're constantly changing from one thing to another and not working towards a common goal, you're going to fail. Likewise, if you can't make a change, you're going to fail. And so that's the point that we're in today. We've been able, I think, to change. I was interested in attending InfoBase's conference in Salt Lake City and listening to John Nesbitt talk about, he's the author of Megatrends and the global paradox. And you know what he did is describe almost exactly DHI and how it began as a little startup company where the power of just a few individuals had a great effect on the dairy industry. We recognized very early that the dairy cow was an ideal for data processing. And we talked about EDPM. How many of you know about EDPM? electronic data processing machines. That's all we had back in those days. There were no computers. I just tell you this, that in my belief that we need to be acquainted with the people who are the leaders in the field. I've always attended the American Dairy Science meetings. I've been a member for a long time. And Mildred and I, in June of 1954, attended the National Dairy meetings in Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania. We had already had on order the equipment to put into our basement to begin operation of this system with dairy records on the 1st of July of 1954. And during that meeting, IBM came in with a big fanfare, very much like the InfoBase thing. Some of you may have seen that. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture came in, and they were going to develop this system and do it for the whole nation. Well, our hearts sunk. Mildred and I sitting there, we had this on order. As soon as we got out, my father and mother were with me. We'd been visiting a sister back in Baltimore. I called and got our IBM salesman out of bed out here in Utah. And I said, Bri, I want to cancel the order for our equipment. The USDA is going to do this for the whole nation. And he said, Bliss, it's too late. The equipment's on your front porch. We came that close to not getting DHI started. Well, there's a lot of other things. I've taken too much time already. Let me just say that I want Mildred to stand up here with me. Without her, this would have been totally impossible. She's been by my side from the very first day when we hired our first employee in the basement of our home in Logan. A year later, we moved to Provo when I moved to BYU as Dean of Admissions and Records. And you know one thing that about Mildred, she's still here almost every day. And you know, she has the knack of being able to look at a pile of mail that we get every day, and she can spot which ones of those envelopes have got checks in them. And she gets those and gets them to Lucy, and they make the deposit, and I bet our people who pay us for our service are amazed at how fast those checks are. And one other thing I want to say is that she's very happy to pass the payroll checks out each pay period. I've been in there a time or two, and she knows most of you by name, and many of you stop by her office to pick up the check. So I want to tell you that without her, this thing could not have been possible. And the greatest thing she did was give us 3 fine sons, Vern, Lynn, and Ken. And we're pleased for this opportunity to be living here in Provo, Mayor. I've had people in California, where a lot of our customers are, tell me, why don't you move to California? And I have a hard time telling them why I don't, until they visit us, and then when they see, they come and they look at it in the eyes of our employees, they see our work habits and what we do, they say, Bliss, we can understand why you don't want to move to California. You could never put this kind of an organization together down there. Well, thanks a lot for coming. We appreciate sharing these few ideas with you. The dairy cow is the foster mother of the human race. In spite of the fact that she gets a lot of unfavorable publicity today, she's still a very important animal. She consumes a lot of waste products and produces nature's most perfect food. And don't you believe these things that people tell you about how bad milk is. There are some people who are allergic to it. There's some people who are allergic to fresh air. But we're working in a great industry, and we've branched out now, and you're going to hear more about this. Many of you know about our health care. We're positioned in an excellent place right now in that great industry. And we know how to process information and convert it into process data, into information into knowledge, knowledge into intelligence, and intelligence into wisdom. That's been our goal at DHI, and we think we've been very successful in doing that. Appreciate your being here and sharing this with us today. Thank you very much.